Right. But I would like to take 1 minute, since I didn't get a chance to answer this discussion on conservative versus liberal.
We're going to have, I promise you, you're going to have another opportunity to do that. I promise you, coming up in like 2 minutes, or 2 questions. I just want to go right now to Janet Hook.
Economic stimulus.
Well, the governor says that you have to borrow for a handout of a check from the Chinese. Where are you going to get the money to build the highway? Same old thing. We have a foreign policy where we blow up bridges overseas, and then we tax the people to go over and rebuild the bridges overseas, and our bridges are falling down and our infrastructure is falling down. So yes, this money should be spent back here at home. We have $1 trillion foreign operation to operate our empire. That's where the money is. You can't keep borrowing from China. You can't keep printing the money. We have to cut some spending. That's what nobody here talks about. Where do you cut spending if you want to spend some money? We need lower taxes, less regulations, and we need to free up the market. We can't expect the government to do everything. We have to have faith and confidence that the market works, but you can't do any of that unless you look at the monetary system.
Next question is Senator McCain from Jim Vandehei.
We're staying on the economy here. As you
to stop. One place where Ron Paul and I are in total agreement. Spending is out of control, and I'm tired of borrowing money from China.
Let's pick up on that. Yes or no, Congressman Paul, was Sandra Day O'Connor the right choice?
I wouldn't have appointed her because I would have looked for somebody that I would have seen as a much stricter constitutionalist.
Senator McCain?
I'm proud of Sandra Day O'Connor as a fellow.
Congressman Paul, this comes from Jay Majumdar from Roswell, Georgia, and he wants to know if you agree with Senator McCain's statement that the United States might need to have U.S. troops in Iraq for as long as even 100 years.
I don't even think they should have gone. So keeping them for 100 years, where's the money going to come from? The country's in bankruptcy, and when I listen to this argument, I find it rather silly because they're arguing technicalities of a policy they both agree with. They agreed going in, agreed for staying how many years, and these are technicalities. We should be debating foreign policy, whether we should have interventionism or non-interventionism, whether we should be defending this country or whether we should be the policemen of the world, whether we should be, running our empire or not, and how are we going to have guns and butter? The 70s were horrible because we paid for the guns and butters of the 60s. Now we're doing the same thing, and nobody even seems to care. The dollar's crashing, and you're talking about these technicalities about who said what, when. In 1952, we Republicans were elected to stop the war in Korea. 1968, we were elected to stop the war in Vietnam. And tragically, we didn't stop it very fast. 30,000 more men died. So when I talk about these long-term stays, I think, how many men are you willing to let die for this? For something that has nothing to do with our national security. There were no Al-Qaeda there, had nothing to do with 9/11, and there was no threat to our national security. They never committed aggression. It's unconstitutional. It's an undeclared war. And we have these silly arguments going on about who said what when. I think it's time to debate foreign policy and why we don't follow the Constitution and only go to war with a declaration of war.
Governor Huckabee, the idea of 100-year involvement of the U.S., the idea of 100-year involvement by the U.S. in Iraq.
Well, first of all,
that are supporting me.
Congressman Paul, what makes you capable of being leader both on the economy and the military?
The Constitution is very clear that the President's commander-in-chief of the military, but the President's not the commander-in-chief of the economy or of the people. And when we get asked questions like, how are you going to manage the economy? It's a reflection of conventional wisdom, but of a lot of lack of understanding of how the economy works. The President's not supposed to manage and run the economy. The people are supposed to do this. The government's supposed to give them sound money, low taxes, less regulations. The people are supposed to run it. But here we're assuming that the President's supposed to run the economy. We're not supposed to manage it. We're not supposed to manage the people. What role do you think the federal government
should have in, does the federal government, in your opinion, have a role in stimulating the economy?
Yes, by lower taxes and less regulations. They could do a whole lot by having sound money where we don't print the money out of thin air. That causes the business cycle. That causes your bubbles. We're always dealing with the symptoms and the disease and never saying, how did this come about? It comes about because we have a Federal Reserve that creates money and credit out of thin air. There's a lot of malinvestment. That's the most important thing to understand about the inflation of the monetary system, is the malinvestment. Then later on, people suffer, you wipe out a middle class, but it's the evil of it all is the vehicle for financing wars that we shouldn't be in and a welfare state that we shouldn't be doing. So yes, we have a role to play, but it's a negative role. We want the people to be free. We don't want to manage the people and tell them how to live. And we need a commander-in-chief. But the most important thing on it as a commander-in-chief is not moving troops around as much as it is having a wise foreign policy that doesn't get us involved in so many things, and we get trapped and we linger year after year. We've been doing this for so long.
Yep.
And I like President Bush's argument that we have a humble foreign policy when he ran in 2000, and that we not be the policeman of the world.
Governor Huckabee, Congressman Paul?
I supported Ronald Reagan in 1976, and there were only 4 members of Congress that did. Also in 1980, Ronald Reagan came and campaigned for me in 1978. I'm not sure exactly what he would do right now, but I do know that he was very sympathetic to the gold standard, and he told me personally that no great nation that went off the gold standard ever remained great. And he was very, very serious about that. So he had a sound understanding about monetary policy. And for that reason, I would say look to Ronald Reagan's ideas on money, because he too was concerned about runaway inflation and what it does to a country when you ruin the currency. And that's what's happening today. The dollar is going down, and our country is going to be on the ropes if we don't reverse that trend.
Governor Huckabee?
Now, here is Ron Paul speaking after the debate on CNN's website. They let him speak on their website for another 6 minutes because people wanted to see more of him.
We're online, and a lot of people were writing and saying that wanted to hear more from you. So this is an opportunity for them to hear more from you right now. Now, the debate started off this evening with a question about, are we better off now than we were 8 years ago? You said no, and you really talked about the middle class plight.
Right, and I'm always talking about monetary policy. And the middle class is wiped out when you ruin a currency. So we're not as well off as we were. But it's not just this administration. We've had a flawed monetary system since the 1913, since we've had our Federal Reserve. But what I'm afraid is if we continue this, we won't have a middle class. We're going to have a lot of poor and a lot of rich people. And this is characteristic of what happens when you destroy a currency. And you do that to pay for big government, because you don't have to tax and you can't borrow anymore. So they just print the money, which is, a lot of people don't realize that, but it's a foolish system, and it's very dangerous, and I'm trying to stop it.
With the Federal Reserve reducing interest